This is an infantry guide made in response to Kamikaze's infantry guide, which I did not think was very good. As an introduction, I'm going to state that your strength as an infantry player comes from two spaces. First and foremost is your skill in the game, and the second, but not much less importantly, is your settings and PC performance. The primary focus of this video is going to be the skill space, as it's the area in which you can most readily improve, so I won't go into too much detail on the settings and performance side of things. Your frame rate in PlanetSide does affect your rate of fire with automatic weapons, and without at least 60 frames per second, it's almost impossible to wall climb. There's a video by Baddie on setting up your user options, ini file, and NVIDIA graphics card settings, and I've linked that in the description. To note, mouse acceleration can negatively impact your ability to flick to targets and track them, so do make sure that you disable any operating system mouse acceleration, and then make sure to select use raw mouse input when in game. But if you do download and use the user options file from Baddie's video, then that should automatically be enabled. Now, there are a wide variety of skills that do come together in infantry gameplay that decide the difference between being a weak player versus being one of the farmers at the top tail of the performance bell curve. The different skills can be divided into two main sets. The first set is the mechanical skills such as your aim, strafing, bursting and shuffling, and the second set are macro skills such as positioning in fights, fight selection, loadout knowledge, and target selection. Mechanical skills. We'll start by discussing the mechanical skills. When honing your skills, it's generally best to focus on improving one skill at a time. This way you can put your full attention into fully improving what you're working on, and so I wouldn't recommend trying to improve your aim, strafing, and bursting all at the same time. I think it would be a bit too much to think about. Aim is probably the most impactful area mechanically that you can work on. The headshot time to kill here on TTK with many weapons is below a quarter of a second, whereas with body shots it can take 0.75 seconds or longer to score a kill. Due to the spread mechanic in the game, the faster you can kill an enemy, the better. This is because the longer you're shooting for, the larger your cone of fire gets and the more shots you miss. It's common advice from shit players that you should aim for the body and let the recoil move your aim upwards towards the head. This completely wastes the first, most accurate few shots in a burst, and these are the shots that ideally you should be hitting the head with. You should always try to aim for the head of your enemy and track the head. Yes, it's harder, and yes, it takes more effort, but if you do want to improve, then that's what you need to be aiming for. To track your accuracy and headshot ratio during a session, I'd recommend that you install the recursion overlay. An added benefit of this is that it comes with a crosshair overlay as well, which is very helpful. Flinch and screen shake do affect your aim, and so I would recommend considering the battle-hardened implant, at least while you're working on your aim, but it is quite strong in general. Another thing to note is that having a higher field of view and a lower magnification optic means that shake and flinch will be less noticeable. Strafing is probably the first skill you should focus on, not necessarily because it's the most important, but because it's the quickest to learn and implement into your gameplay. Good players are going to be aiming for the head, and so strafing left and right unpredictably can make them miss shots or even swap to aiming for the body. Similarly, if you're strafing against bad players, then they're also more likely to miss their shots. To start with, you should hop over to the VR training and pay attention to moving left and right as you shoot. You should try mixing it up a little and make sure that the duration of your strafes is not too short and not too long. You don't want to strafe too quickly because then you're going to be barely moving on the screen of your opponent, whereas if you strafe too long, then you're going to be a linearly moving target that's easy to track. You should get comfortable with strafing while you're shooting and keep your aim on target and swapping targets while you strafe. Once you've done that, then you can take it to one of the live continents and try strafing in fights against actual players. Since it serves for the same purpose as strafing, I'll also address crouching in brief. Crouching has been nerfed and so is not as impactful as it once was, but when you're going against players who are aiming for the head, then crouching can really throw off their aim. There's not really a best duration of which to crouch for, so it's something you're going to have to figure out for yourself, but it's certainly effective against players who are aiming for the head. Bursting is probably the second most important skill behind aiming in terms of mechanics, and is like strafing in that it should be fairly simple to implement into your gameplay. Arguably, bursting is actually more important than your aim, since if the bullets don't go where your reticule is, then your aim is completely meaningless. In planetside, your cone of fire blooms quite rapidly and does become very large. Given the importance of headshots, it should be patently obvious why having a large cone of fire can be a bad thing. There are two factors to controlling your cone of fire. First is that you shouldn't shoot before you aim down sights. Your hip fire and aimed cone of fire are different, and if you have the hip fire bloom, then aiming down your sights will not reduce your cone of fire. This means that shooting before you've completely aimed in is almost guaranteed to make you lose any gunfight you get into. The second factor is bursting. Different guns bloom at different speeds. The rate at which your cone of fire resets back to normal is tied to the rate of fire of your weapon. With guns that have high bloom per shot and very low rates of fire, such as the Gorsaw, then you need to be firing very short bursts. Think 2 bullets per burst as a rule of thumb. With high rate of fire forgiving weapons like the MSWR, you may use longer bursts, up to say 5 shots per burst. Some people in fact don't burst at all in close quarters, while others burst no matter what. It's going to be up to you to find what you're comfortable with. Regardless, you are going to have to learn to control your cone of fire if you want to improve as an infantry player. Bursting means you're going to be experiencing the first shot recoil multiplier more. Therefore, a lot of players may prefer, similarly when talking about the aim area, that they have a higher field of view and stick to 1x optics. Again, this reduces flinch as well. Bursting is pretty easy to work on, and you can start with it in the VR training, just shooting at dummies, and then you can work on drilling it into being an unconscious thing that you do automatically and bring that into live fights on the live continents. Shuffling is the final mechanical area that I'm going to be addressing. Shuffling is not particularly important, but it's quite easy to pull off and can occasionally be quite useful. The quick rundown is that you have to move the mouse left and right while sprinting forwards, and you strafe into the direction that you're turning in. As you move the mouse left, this means you strafe left, and as you move the mouse right, you strafe to the right. While shuffling, you can also consume medkits to stave off death for longer and heal up if you've taken damage to your health. One important thing to note is that taking medkits reduces your movement speed when you use them, so you should jump before you consume the medkit. This means you maintain your velocity and it makes your shuffle more effective. Obviously, jumping continuously bleeds off your movement speed, so you shouldn't be spam jumping or trying to bunny hop or anything like that. An example use case for shuffling is when you're being shot at by a light assault that's above you or behind you. Carbines have small magazines, so you can often survive long enough that they run out of ammo and then turn around and kill them. Crosshair placement. Crosshair placement is a surprisingly important skill to have. Having your crosshair resting at the correct height whilst moving around the map and holding positions will increase your headshot ratio significantly, and it will reduce the amount you have to correct your aim by when peeking or being peeked. In planetside, it's quite easy to quickly work on your crosshair placement. This is because there's a yellow line around head height in almost all of the buildings in the game. The upper edge of this yellow band is head height for standing infantry players, and you should get used to keeping your crosshair at this height while moving around. Staring at the floor is the obvious cardinal sin in this case, as it means you have reduced situational awareness and you're going to have to correct significantly to get headshots when an enemy comes onto your screen. Macro skills. The main macro skills to consider are your positioning, fight selection, loadouts, and target selection. When it comes to positioning, it's a topic that goes very deep and has a wide breadth of factors to cover. It would be too much for a single video if I tried to cover all of the points in detail, and so in lieu of that, I will instead give a few general tips that can be quickly applied to your gameplay to improve it. First is that you should stay near cover. If you're running through the open, then you can't tuck into cover if somebody peeks you and starts shooting you. The ability to re-peek when somebody gets the advantage on you will significantly increase your ability to win those fights. Similarly, you should also be able to consider when multiple enemies peek you that you may want to slice the pie and outplay them, and for that to be possible, you need to have cover nearby that you can duck behind. Slicing the pie. It's difficult to fight multiple enemies. If you have 2 players shooting at you at once, it's going to mean that you're going to die very quickly, and the flinch is also going to be more severe. The ability to break down a 1v2 or 1v3 or etc. fight into a set of 1v1s is massively important. If you can break a 1vx into a set of 1v1s, then you can keep using Peeker's advantage, and you can also proc, assimilate, and recharge your shields. If you're a heavy assault, you can recharge your adrenaline shield. So breaking down 1vx fights into 1v1s is very important. Don't try to breach choke points either. Fights on PlanetSide are very large, and at any given contested choke point there can be 5, 10, even 15 or more players watching one angle. Trying to push through a chaotic doorway means you're first going to be shot in the back by your teammates and then blasted in the front by all of those enemies. Instead, for every large fight, you should be trying to flank the enemy. The vast majority of kill streaks that good players get either come from holding down a good position defensively with a head glitch or close cover, or it comes from getting a good flank off. This barely scratches the surface of positioning in PlanetSide, and fortunately there is a series made by Dr. Saisho that covers positioning very well, and I'd recommend watching. That series can be found linked in the description. Fight selection is the next topic under macro knowledge. The choice of bases you fight at is going to make a big difference in how much fun you have as an infantry player. Some bases are so awful that there is almost nothing you can do to enjoy the game while playing at them. A good example would be Chimney Rock. There's no good Sunday relocation, and honestly defending the base isn't that much better either. The base is full of a lot of open areas and you're forced to push towards a single point far away from the spawn where vehicles can shoot you with Hesh or you can get bansheed. A good loose rulebook for selecting fights is that defending bases is a lot easier than attacking bases. Single point amp stations are almost always trash. Tech plants are usually fun. Containment site fights are usually bad. Biolab fights, once you're decent at infantry, are almost always good. Regardless of attacking or defending, though when you're attacking, don't push from the landing pad. Pushing from the landing pad is a retarded joke and you need to be using the teleporters. Individually, you'll learn to play the game at which bases you enjoy fighting at, and you'll also learn which bases you absolutely hate. This is going to vary a lot between players, and there's no concrete list of good bases I can give you, though I may make a video in the future looking at the continents and pointing out my favourite and least favourite bases. The third area under macro knowledge is your loadout knowledge. The customization of your class is another broad topic to discuss. For the Heavy Assault class, my Heavy Assault loadout guide, trademark, is a decent starting point. Again, this topic could warrant a video in and of itself, so I'll be giving you some loose pointers and quickly applicable tips. Don't waste certs buying guns. The default weapon is almost always the best weapon that you can have, regardless of class and faction. If not the best, then the default weapon is almost always viable. You should focus on certing out your class skill, and for infiltrators that means the nano armor cloak, though the hunter cloak is also strong. For medics, it's the nano auto regen device and the medic tool. For heavy assaults, it's the adrenaline shield. For light assaults, it's the jetpack, and you shouldn't play engineer. Start with the skirmisher as light assault, and then you can side grade to ambushers or Icarus later on. You should pretty much always be using nanoweave armor in your suit slot. The 10% movement reduction is insignificant compared to the value gained from taking 20% reduced damage from body shots. At a higher level, there's more than that to consider, but the basic setup is to always run nanoweave. When it comes to implants, the vast majority of them are useless garbage. The best implants are Assimilate, Battle-Hardened Athlete, and Survivalist, and you should pick 2 from those 4 as fits your class. If you want to consider other implants, then there are implant tier lists and class guides on YouTube, and there's the Infantry Mentors channel in the PlanetSide Discord. So I'm not going to go into specifics on all of the implants because it's way beyond the scope of the video. When it comes to grenades, the conch grenades and quick flash grenades are the strongest choices because they give the enemy no counterplay and they're really easy to use. Though the default frag grenades are also pretty solid, so you can run those if you like. When it comes to pistols, anything other than the pilot, underboss, or commissioner is just kneecapping yourself, so stick to those 3. The last section to discuss is target selection. When you're in a situation that you have to fight multiple enemies, then target selection becomes very important. When you're flanking, the person you shoot at is probably going to turn around and start shooting you, and if enemies see their teammates being shot from behind and turning around, then they're also probably going to turn around. This means you generally want to focus the highest risk enemies first. The enemies that are actively looking at you should be the important ones for you to focus on. As an example, if you have the choice between shooting at a heavy assault that's not facing you and a light assault shitter running at you with a shotgun, it's pretty obvious that you should shoot the one that's running at you with a shotgun. Target selection can be the difference between a flank getting you a triple kill or a flank letting you wipe a dozen enemies or more. So, wrapping up, I've loosely covered all of the skills that are going to have a large impact on your infantry gameplay. The information I've given is far from the be-all end-all of the discussion, and when working on each skill you should look around on the internet for more in-depth resources on the specifics. Hopefully, however, after watching this video, you'll be able to work meaningfully at improving your infantry gameplay.